Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I'm going to be taking you on a chilling collection of scary ghost stories. I also would like to wish a very happy birthday to Cheyenne. Wishing you all the best. But for now it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. First of all, I am a very scientifically minded person. I do not even believe in God. But there have been things happening throughout my life that I cannot explain. I'm going to call the road I live off Highway X for privacy reasons. I have lived there my entire life from 1998 to present day. I like to describe where I live as the middle of nowhere, surrounded by other people. Where I live used to be a Revolutionary War township, though no battles happened here. Nobody has died on my subdivision either. In the mid-20th century, the part of Highway X I live on used to be a Girl Scout camp, and in the early 1900s, before my family moved here, our property was a cow pasture. We did have a teenage girl die in 2006 after taking a sharp turn about a quarter of a mile from my house. In 2011, 2 miles away, one of the gravel roads branching off Highway X, a mother drove into a creek during high water, and she and her children tragically drowned. My mum is very religious, and when I ask her about her experiences, she gets nervous and does not like to answer, so I'm only telling the surface details. When I was a baby, my mum heard someone saying, "Hi there, hi," in a cooing kind of way over the baby monitor. She said she couldn't tell whether the voice were male or female. She went to my dad, who was on the computer, and asked him whether he had been in my room. He said no. That could easily be explained by the fact that baby monitors can pick up radio signals, but it's still strange enough to mention. When I was a little older, around 2 or 3, my mum said she was sitting on our front porch and saw a man in a wide-brimmed hat and a trench coat standing under the outdoor lights at our neighbor's house. He was just standing there doing nothing. She said she didn't think much of it at first, only thought, "That's not Charlie. Charlie doesn't wear hats like that." Eventually she went back inside because it was weirding her out. About 10 years later, she said her best friend's husband was casually telling a story about how his dad had been haunted by a man who fit the exact same description, and he had no idea about my mum's story. The man would not leave his dad alone until his dad finally said, "Get out of my house." My mum's best friend freaked out and said that when she was little, she saw a man exactly like that pass by a window at her grandma's house. Then my mum freaked out and told her story too. My mum told me this, so I asked my best friend Google, and apparently it's something a lot of people see. Around the same time, my mum saw the man in the hat. My dad heard someone knocking 3 times on our door. It was nighttime, and when he looked outside, nobody was there. My mum grew up hearing stories from my grandma, who was a nurse, and she always said that people at her job would hear 3 knocks on their door, open it, and then die soon after. So of course, my mum freaked out and said, "Do not open that door." When I was about 12, I started getting hypnagogic hallucinations. When I closed my eyes, I would see vivid, disturbing images, often people being hanged or people covered in blood. I was terrified of gore and did not watch my first horror movie until I was 16, so this was not inspired by anything I had seen on television. It stopped happening once I moved into my dorm, but when it does happen, it's only at my house. When I was 13, we had a light switch in the basement that could dim when pressed. I had a sleepover in the basement with my friends, and we were talking about boys or whatever 13-year-old girls talk about, when suddenly the light started dimming and brightening repeatedly. We all freaked out, and then it stopped, and never did it again while we had that lighting set up. One night when I was about 15, my ex-boyfriend and I were driving down Highway X, and both of us complained about feeling like something was wrong. We were about 2 miles away from my house when we saw what looked like a cloaked figure fly over our car. It looked like the Grim Reaper. We both saw it and both screamed. I told my dad, and he said that when he feels like something bad is about to happen, he's usually right, and I should not ignore that feeling. This is coming from my father, the skeptic. 2 years later, I walked past the hallway entrance and heard, "Hi," right in my ear loud and clear. I shrieked and sprinted to my mum. I asked her if the television was on in her room, and she said no, and when I checked, she was right. A few months ago, I walked into the living room and saw that my mum's recliner was empty. I remember thinking, wow, mum must have gone to bed early already, and she didn't even tell me. The next morning, my mum asked if she had talked to me before she left for bed. I told her no, and that I remember thinking that it was odd that she hadn't said goodnight. She said she had woken up after falling asleep in the recliner and said, "I'm going to bed," and then heard a voice behind her that did not exactly sound like me say, "Oh, you're going to bed?" She also said our next door neighbor had something in her house, but she would not elaborate or give me a time frame. By that point, I had already asked enough questions about weird things going around on Highway X, and she isn't comfortable talking about the paranormal too much because she's afraid it will invite spirits. Does anyone have any theories as to why this may happen? When I was around 12, during one summer, my sister, who is 5 years older than me, was out with friends after work. We shared a bedroom. I was up late doodling in a notebook in bed, and there was an older glass television set next to my bed that was turned off. At one point, I looked up and saw my sister walking out of our bedroom door and into the stairwell in the reflection of the television screen. When I turned around to greet her, she wasn't there. I got up and walked into the stairwell, but all the lights were still off downstairs and in the bathroom next to our bedroom. I thought she must have run downstairs really fast, so I went down to look for her, but there was no one there either. By then I was getting a little spooked, and I wanted to prove myself wrong, so I went outside. Her car was still gone. I sprinted back inside, ran upstairs to my parents' room, and woke my mum up to tell her I was pretty sure I had just seen a ghost. She was too tired to do much about it, so I went back to my bedroom feeling terrified. When I thought about it later, I realized the girl had been wearing a long-sleeved dress that looked somewhat vintage, and my sister was very much a tomboy in those days, but she had blonde hair like my sister, and she was looking towards me while walking out of the room. I stayed awake with my light on until my actual sister got home, and only then did I feel safe enough to sleep. It still creeps me out to think about to this day. I do not really believe much in the afterlife, but I know I saw a young girl walking out of the door. I was not especially tired. I had not been watching anything earlier that night to scare me, and I was not even frightened at first because I thought it was my sister. I can't explain it. I never saw her or anything like her again. The place I worked used to be a holding jail a long time ago, but has since been converted into a bar. Everyone has stories about the resident ghost, who we nicknamed Sebastian. The first time I saw Sebastian, I looked down the stairs while I was opening up and saw a pair of legs in black pants and smart shoes. The ceiling was blocking the rest of him from view, and when I went downstairs to ask how he had gotten in, he ran down the hallway and vanished. There were a few other staff members who mentioned seeing a man in a black suit after hours while they were cleaning up. Whenever they tried to approach or speak to him, he would turn a corner and vanish. Sometimes after closing, we would hear someone ringing the bells on staff member bikes downstairs, or hear a crash and find that the bikes had been moved to a different spot. Other times, people would see a man in black duck into the office, and by the time they went in after him, he would be gone. The thing that convinced all of us, it was not just a story we had built up through joking about it all the time, happened when the new chefs arrived. They didn't speak much English and would leave as soon as dinner service was over, so they never really took part in the Sebastian stories. One day, one of them asked about a man in black who kept leading on the ordering window while they were cleaning. Sebastian was pretty chill though. He never scared us or did anything mean. I wonder if he just liked hanging out in his favorite bar. Who knows if he died in the jail itself or in the bar a long time ago. But either way, I'm glad he's not a creepy ghost. My boyfriend and I were home eating dinner. Our front door was open and the screen door was shut. Then we heard the screen door swing open and slam shut. So we both went into the living room and stepped out onto the front porch to investigate, and as soon as we did, we were hit by a thick, cloying, floral, sweet smell. It honestly smelled like funeral flowers, and if you've ever smelt that smell before, it was far stronger than that and more concentrated and seemed to be right in front of our house. This, of course, left us both feeling uneasy, so we went back inside and headed to our bedroom. I sat on the edge of my bed, which faced the hallway, and one of our dogs came over and jumped into my lap. My boyfriend and I started talking about what the slamming door and the smell could have been. During a pause in the conversation, I was looking straight ahead into the hall, when I saw a dark shadow move down it, pass our bedroom door, and go into another room at the end. It was tall, vaguely human-shaped and completely black, like the light around it had been sucked away. Our dog saw it too. He started barking, growling, and whining like crazy. For some reason, that scared me even more than the shadow itself. The fact that he reacted to it made it feel real. I started crying and said I wanted to leave the house, so we put the dogs in the car and got out of there. We were already having plumbing problems, so we ended up staying the night in a hotel. When we came back the next day, everything seemed normal, almost like nothing at all had happened. It was definitely one of the spookiest things I have ever experienced. I used to live with my in-laws, and things were already weird to begin with. One incident that really stood out happened when my son was having a tantrum. He was round about 1 and refusing to eat his lunch. My then fiancé, now husband, and I were both very stressed and exhausted since we worked third shift, and our son finally calmed down. The three of us were relaxing in the living room when we heard a voice, a male voice at that, clear as day, said, "Harder than you thought, isn't it?" There was no one else in the room. My fiancé and I looked at each other in confusion while our son looked around. He too was trying to find the source of the voice. He would often be found in his room, talking or giggling to himself, or staring at certain spots on the walls. For a while, he also kept talking about someone called Timmy. Another time, we were out most of the night at some friend's house playing Dungeons and Dragons because we're nerds. We came home and relaxed in our room for about an hour, before we had to go collect our son as he was staying with his grandparents at the time. My husband was on his phone and I was just lying there when suddenly I heard someone whisper my name loudly in my ear. "Eve." I even felt my hair move, which made me jump. While living there, I heard my name called multiple other times as well. After my mother-in-law passed away in the house, the activity only seemed to increase in both intensity and frequency. I remember one time I was doing the dishes when I felt the distinct feeling that someone was standing behind me. I look over my shoulder, and of course, nobody was there. This sensation happened many times. On another occasion, my father-in-law and his new girlfriend went outside. They always closed their bedroom door so the dogs would not get in unsupervised. No sooner had they left the house than the door swung open again. All the dogs were still in the living room, and pressure from the front door had never affected the bedroom door like that before or since. One of the strangest things that happened to me in that house was this last story. My husband and I always slept with our door closed, but one night I woke up and saw the door cracked open with what looked like a face peeking in. At first I thought it might be my father-in-law, but then I remembered he would never just open the door like that. He always knocked first and would leave it if there was no answer. I also thought it could have been my son, but the face was too high up to be a child. He was probably around 3 at the time, and the scariest part was that I felt completely naked and exposed in that moment, like whatever it was could see right through me even though I was under a blanket. I lay there completely still and stared at it until I fell back asleep, afraid that if I moved even a little, it would know I was awake. I kept thinking then, what would it be? I woke up in the morning and the door was closed and everything had gone back to normal. There were more experiences, but those are the ones that stand out to me the most. We have since moved, thankfully, and I can report that our new house seems to be phantom-free, for the meantime anyway. This was around 2012, in a hotel in Canary Wharf, London. My girlfriend and I had spent the previous day shopping, then went back to our room and fell asleep together. Sometime the next morning the room was still dimly lit, but I awoke. Through my half-opened, sleepy eyes and without my glasses on, I saw the impression of a girl on my side of the bed, near my feet. At first I thought she was rummaging through my bags and assumed my girlfriend was looking through her new purchases, only for me to realize my girlfriend was asleep next to me. I swore and said something along the lines of "what the hell?" and felt my heart start to race. The figure looked like some kind of grey translucent girl with long straight hair. She stood up, calmly took a step or two away from me towards the foot of the bed, and then faded away to nothingness. As you can probably imagine, I did not sleep well for the next few nights. I was staying with a friend when this happened. It must have been around 1:30 a.m. She was already asleep, but I was wide awake. I was playing games on my phone or doing something similar when the closed door started to creak open. The door had been clicked all the way shut, so it couldn't have been the wind. At first I thought it was my mum's friend coming to check on us for the night. I called out her name but received no response, and that was when I saw it. A dark shadow figure crawled into the room, on all fours very low to the ground, almost like it was slithering. Then it stood up. It was a tall man, completely black against the darkness of the room. It had no face, but I could feel it when we made eye contact. We stared at each other for a moment and then it vanished. It was completely gone. I freaked out for a minute. I've had spirit encounters before, so this was not even the first ghost I had seen, but this was definitely the most upfront experience I have ever had. The feeling I got from it was not good. There was something dark about it, and I knew this was not a spirit you would want around. Once I calmed down, I got up and turned on the hall light. I thought about getting my friend's mum since she is spiritual like me, but I decided it would be better to deal with it in the morning. I got back in bed with my friend and eventually fell asleep. People have told me they would never have been able to get up after that, or that I would die first in a horror movie, but I honestly did not feel like I was in danger. I knew the spirit was gone, I could feel it. The next morning my mum's friend and I went through the house with Palo Santo wood, cleansing it and banishing the spirit. Then I made some witch salt and lined all the exits and entrances of the house. I think my experience really freaked her out, because now she does a daily cleanse of the home, once in the morning and once at night. My friend, her mum and I have all been to a psychic since then, and learned a few things about what happened. Apparently the spirit was attached to my friend. It had been feeding off her negative energy since she had been going through a hard time lately, and it was surprised that I could see it. The medium said we did the right thing by banishing it, and that if it ever returned we should call her. I go to a historically all-women's college in Mississippi. As you can imagine, a bunch of girls bored in a dorm can create plenty of mischief. My roommate had recently injured her knee and was bedbound for a few days. It was a Sunday night, and our weekend homework load was light, so the boredom set in quick. I was sitting in my dorm room with my roommate and our friend, trying to figure out how to pass the time, when our friend suddenly exclaimed, "I know what we can do to be fun." My roommate and I looked at her with curious eyes. "Let's play with a Ouija board." My roommate and I exchanged apprehensive looks. In the southern US, people can be incredibly superstitious. Supernatural phenomena and the occult are often avoided out of fear. And our college was already rumored to be haunted, so my roommate and I were feeling a little on edge at the proposal. "We don't have a board," I said, and my roommate nodded in agreement. "Well, this website says you can just make your own and it'll work the same," she replied. So we took a Sharpie marker and some leftover presentation board from a project. We used a shot glass as the planchette, and even lit some candles to make the atmosphere appropriate. We all placed our fingers lightly on the glass and waited. At first, nothing happened whatsoever, and we all laughed a little because we were already feeling nervous. And then the glass moved ever so slightly. "Oh, one of you must have jerked the glass," I said. "I thought that was you," the others said. The mood in the dorm changed instantly. It seemed to be getting darker in the room, if that makes sense, even though the candles were still flickering brightly. And then the glass moved to hello. My roommate snatched her hand away and immediately protested the whole activity. Our friend insisted we keep going now as we had made contact. We asked who we were speaking to, and it said it was a girl. We asked if she had gone to our school in the past, and it replied yes. Then suddenly it began moving to ZOZO. We ended our session immediately and prayed for protection. After that, we decided that we needed to get rid of the homemade board, and our friend and I agreed to bury it off campus past the train tracks. We left the dorm room and headed for the elevator on the top floor. But the elevator wouldn't work. It had never malfunctioned before, so the timing definitely weirded us out. My roommate was left to the dorm room, and when we returned, she said that her phone and laptop had started malfunctioning too. Strange things kept happening after that, and some still do. That was our freshman year in 2016, and people still say strange things happen on the top floor of the dormitory. I think whatever we made contact with that night has stuck around. Between 1993 and 4, I lived in a haunted house in Asheville, North Carolina. It was just an ordinary 1960s ranch house, but there was definitely a ghost, an elderly man who had lived there and died there from Alzheimer's disease. When I first looked at the empty house, before I rented it, I opened the closet at the end of the hallway and ran into something physical. It felt exactly like running into a person. I jumped backwards and fell off the floor. After we moved in, I would hear him shuffling around and down the hallway in his slippers, making a flapping sound as he paced. I had my sewing room in what used to be his bedroom, and I would hear him opening the front door, walking down the hallway, turning the doorknob into the room, and then the door would swing open. The front door had not opened, and no one was in the hallway. I never felt very threatened, but I do seem to have a heightened sense of awareness, so I knew something was there. One other thing. He loved the music box we got as a wedding present. I would hear it being wound up on the shelf in the other bedroom, and then it would play and play. It seemed to soothe him. There is another part to the story. My boyfriend and I got married while we were living in that house, and several of our out-of-town guests stayed with us. My boyfriend's brother and his wife stayed in the haunted bedroom for the night. The next morning, I casually asked how they'd slept, and he said fine. Anna said she had a weird dream that an old man was standing over them and staring. I laughed and told her about the ghost, and she turned pale, and they were packing up and heading to a Hilton within 10 minutes. A friend of mine slept several nights in that room and had nothing happen to her. One of the guys I worked with in the newsroom at Asheville said he used to stay with his grandparents a lot when he was little. They had a 2-story house, but when he was 2 years old, they removed the second story. And after that, people would still hear footsteps overhead, doors opening, a rocking chair squeaking, and so on, even though there was no second floor. Sometimes there was even a rooster crowing, though no rooster was there either. It always made me think how something can be left behind, even when it's been removed. When I was around 7 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night because I thought I heard a loud noise in the house. I walked out of my room and looked down the long hallway where I could see the streetlight shining through the window and onto the kitchen floor. I rubbed my eyes and saw what appeared to be my younger brother standing just beyond the beam of light in the shadows. I walked towards him to see what was going on, and the closer I got, the more obvious it became that this small boy was not my brother at all. He was standing there completely still, his head tilted to one side, staring at me with piercing dark eyes that I will never forget. I ran straight into my parents' room as fast as I could, and slept in their bed that night. I never brought it up to them, and I did my best to forget it. For a while, I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. Then, years later, I was a senior in high school, hanging out at our house with my then girlfriend and brother and a few of his friends. It was dark and storming outside, and the power had gone out. I lit a candle, put it in the middle of the floor, and we all lay around talking. Someone suggested we tell ghost stories, and I immediately thought about what I had seen 10 years earlier, so I said, "Guys, I'm gonna tell you something that I've never told a soul. I saw something many years ago right here in this house. I don't care if you believe me or not, but I 100% saw something paranormal over there," and pointed towards the kitchen. Before I could even start my story, my brother cut me off and said, Wait a second, are you serious?" I looked at him confused about why he had interrupted me. Then he looked me dead in the eyes, his face going pale and distressed. Did you happen to see a little boy?" My jaw dropped. I was at a loss for words. Everyone around us started freaking out too because they immediately realized we had both seen the same thing. And I still get goosebumps whenever I think about it. I used to live in an apartment opposite a park in Japan. On the other side of the park was a convenience store, and the quickest way to get there was straight through the park itself. The park was pretty bare. It had a baseball field, a playground, and a path running through it with a few mounds and some plants and thin trees. It wasn't exactly a beautiful place. Well, one summer evening I was heading to the store to buy some cigarettes when I noticed a lady standing off to the side of the path just staring towards the houses nearby. As I got closer, I greeted her with "good evening" in Japanese, but she did not respond. I didn't think much of it at the time and assumed she must have been uncomfortable seeing a foreign man alone in the park at night. She must have been about 5 meters off the path and was standing perfectly still. As I passed her, I looked over and noticed that she had a distressed look on her face and was still staring intently at the house across the street. I didn't really know what to do. I looked at the houses, then back at her, and decided to mind my own business and kept walking. After about 10 more steps, I stopped walking. There was something about her that seemed very wrong, very off, so I turned around, but she wasn't there anymore. Now, remember how I said there wasn't all that much in the park, that it wasn't very pretty? Well, there were no thick trees or bushes, large rocks or buildings or bins she could have hidden behind. This was an open area, and if she had run, there wasn't enough time for her to get out of sight, and I would have heard her on the gravel and dirt path. She vanished in a matter of seconds. I walked around for a few minutes trying to look for her, thinking perhaps this had been a prank, but she was nowhere to be found. The whole atmosphere in the park changed for a moment, and I felt as if I was being watched. All the same, I kept going to the store and decided to take the long way home and avoided that park completely. 3 months later, I was smoking on my balcony one night when I saw her again in the same part of the park, in the same stance, looking towards the same houses. The moment I took my eyes off her, she disappeared again. I was at a secondary school camp. The sleeping area for boys was basically a fenced-off section that also doubled as the activity area. There was only one way in and out, and a big streetlight shone directly onto that spot, so it was very obviously at night. What happened was I woke up needing to pee. As I walked to the porta potties, I saw an old man walking out of the sleeping area. It was late, and no one else was awake, but I saw him clearly. He was shuffling his feet and walking out, and the lamp shone directly on him. He was impossible to miss. I did not think much of it at the time, and just went to the toilet. I forgot about it for 2 years until secondary 4. That was when my friend, who used to be a camp counselor, told us that there was a stone in the activity area that served as a tombstone for an old man who had died there. I knew he was not lying about the stone, because I remembered standing on it. That suddenly clicked, and made me realize I might have actually seen the ghost of the old man. There was no reason for an old man to be entering the boys' sleeping area in the first place, let alone leaving it. There were actual toilets on the other side, not porta potties. I am just glad I did not follow him that night. I bought a bed and breakfast that was built in the year 1850, and after we moved in, people started telling us it was haunted. The house had once belonged to a local doctor, and it had served as both his home and the town hospital. Starting on the second night, strange things began happening. My eldest daughter has health issues, and she said someone was sitting on the edge of her bed at night. On the third night, she was brave enough to look and saw a dark-haired man sitting there with his head in his hands. It seemed our doctor was still making the rounds and checking in on her. A few nights later, we heard heavy footsteps coming down the hall. I hid in a small room and jumped out when the sound was right outside the door. But while the footsteps continued down the hall, there was no one there. My husband left for work a few months, and we would tell him stories about our doctor visits. He was polite, but you could tell he didn't really believe us. When he returned for a visit, he asked about the doctor and whether he had been active recently. We were walking through the halls when he reached for a doorknob, and the door slammed shut. His hand froze in midair, and a few moments later it swung back open until the door handle was resting in his palm. All the time, I told him with a smile. The doctor also liked to change the radio station and move the clocks around, which was a bit of a nuisance, but it was his house too, I guess. One night, he set off the smoke detector in my daughter's bedroom. I took it down, and the alarm was still screaming in my hands. We removed the batteries and it kept on ringing. The whole event felt like a blur, and I finally had to smash the smoke detector into 1,000 pieces before it stopped. The best event happened around 6 months later. We had opened to the public and hosted a very small wedding with fewer than 30 guests at the bed and breakfast. The reception was a success, and people began saying their goodbyes while I started cleaning up. I took a bus pan back to the kitchen full of dishes and then quickly returned because not all the guests had left yet. When I came back, I saw a man in the adjoining room admiring a painting I had hanging over the fireplace mantel. The print looked incredibly similar to the bed and breakfast, with a beautiful garden in front of it. I smiled and told him it was one of my favorite paintings, and he smiled before turning to look at it again. I should have known something was off at first. He was wearing a very old-fashioned brown suit, the kind that might have been in style about 100 years ago, but not today, right down to a pocket watch chain in his shoes. I walked out the room, past the front door, and went into the reception room, all of about 15 feet, then turned to ask if he had enjoyed the wedding, but he was gone. The door was still locked, no footsteps were heard on the wooden floor, he had simply disappeared. Our family believes in ghosts, and every time he made an appearance, we would just acknowledge the visit and thank him for caring for us. I still think he was probably just lonely, and was happy that the house was being used and cared for again. When I was 3 years old, my mother, father, 2 older brothers and I moved into a 2-story house in Washington state. I remember that the house had been renovated and my room was on the 2nd floor, separate from my parents' room. When I was 4, my uncle died of liver failure in my bedroom during the night. The next morning I woke up early because I heard crying. At first I thought it was my grandmother, but I did not understand what was happening until I tried to go upstairs from where I had been sleeping on a guest bed the night before. When I reached the 3rd step, I saw my father carrying my uncle's lifeless body over his shoulders and out the front door. I ran back to the spare bed, held my head in my hands, and sat there in shock as I realized he was gone. My mother came downstairs a while later to break the news to me, but before she could say anything I said, "I know, Mummy. I know." Then we both cried. Not long after that, and until we moved out of the house when I was 17, we would hear footsteps walking down the hall towards my room and back again. They were so loud that my father thought there was an intruder in the house, but when he checked, no one would be there. I also remember one night that when I was 10 years old, I saw the outline of a man running towards me down the hall, while I stood in the dining room. The outline flashed like a turn signal on a car as it got closer. It was dark pink, almost light maroon, and it disappeared halfway down the hall, but I felt it move through me. I was so scared that I froze, then sat down on a nearby couch and tried to process what I had just seen. I do not remember much about that night, but I do remember that hallways always scared me. It felt like something was watching me very closely, and that feeling would go away only when I crossed into my bedroom and closed the door. Over the next several years, everything slowly got worse. After my uncle died, we inherited a few things from him. One of them was a flexible blanket-like board game, with a backgammon on one side and a Ouija board on the other. The planchette came with it, and as far as I knew, no one had ever used it. Years passed before my father found it. Because he was a Jehovah's Witness and believed objects like that were devilish, he burnt it, and I remember black smoke coming from it, thick smoke. The flames were purple at first, then normal, or at least that's how my 8-year-old brain remembered it. Even though our family already had problems with yelling and fighting, things seemed to get worse once the board had been burned. My father was never fully the same in the house. He was abusive and would nearly black out in rage when he and my brother fought. I remember trying to pull my father off my brother after he knocked him back while my brother was in a chair during an argument. I do not know what made me do it, but when my father knocked me back and raised a closed fist to hit me, I remember seeing his eyes turn dark red. He stopped, his expression changed, and he stormed off into his room. From that point on, he never got angry with my brother again, at least not as far as I know. I knew something was possessing him and tormenting our family because I had seen and felt something dark within that house. I never liked walking around it, and the only place I felt truly safe was my bedroom. It became my sanctuary for a lot of things. It did not protect me from all the abuse, but it protected me from some of the things that could hurt me. I felt my uncle's presence there for years. I knew it was him because his energy always felt soothing to me. There were a few times when I felt too scared to sleep, or could not sleep because of the insomnia. And when I was lying there with my stuffed white rabbit, its arms would move in the dark, as if he were making it dance to calm me down so I could fall asleep. All the abuse I endured in that house finally ceased when my parents divorced, We went our separate ways and the house was sold. I'm 30 now, happily married and living in another state, but I still occasionally dream about that house, mostly as nightmares. I know the house is still haunted, and not by my uncle because I know he crossed over when I was in my 20s, and I was able to help him move on. What is there feels demonic, and I believe there is a portal still open there. I only hope someone knows how to close it properly. My biological father lives in a creepy old farmhouse that he renovated. One night, I was helping him build out the office late at night, and he went into the bathroom while I kept working. I was on the floor and had just set my hammer down when I suddenly felt something like a presence, and I looked up towards where I thought someone would be, but there was nothing there. When I reached back down for my hammer, it was no longer where I had left it. It was out of arm's reach, maybe 5 feet further away, but I hadn't moved it at all. When he came back from the bathroom, I told him what had happened, and he just laughed and said, "The little girl must be playing with you." I was like, "What little girl?" He told me that every now and then he'll hear the laughter of a little girl, and has even seen her. She is always wearing the same pair of overalls and just kind of wanders around upstairs. I'm not usually one to believe in paranormal experiences, but I have no explanation for it other than the idea that a ghost girl wanted to play. I moved to Mexico when I was 11. My dad built a house himself over the course of a few months, and for the first 2 months we lived at my grandma's house. During that time, I had 2 unexplainable incidents happen. The first one happened when I was in the living room with my sister watching TV around midnight. Everyone else was asleep. The front door led into a short hallway, and there was a door on the right that opened into the living room. You could not get into the living room without walking through that hallway first, and there was a light that stayed on in there all night. The door had glass panes, so you could see into the hallway from the living room. That night, my sister and I saw a black figure walk past the door. It looked like a tall, stocky man, but only the silhouette was visible. Other than that, it was pitch black. No one in the house fit that description, and the front door was locked, so there was no way some stranger had walked in. My sister ran to the bedroom, and I sat there in shock for a few seconds before I could get up and run too. When I mentioned it to some of our cousins a few days later, they said it was Grandpa. He had passed away a few years before we moved in there, and apparently other people had seen his figure before. I saw him again about 2 weeks later, but I was alone that time, and I was just as scared as I had been the first time. After my dad built most of our house, we moved in. For 3 years, nothing strange happened. Then, in the summer of 2021, when I was 14, things changed. That summer I got hooked on an online game and would stay up until the early hours of the morning playing. My parents did not like that, so I had to sneak into the living room late at night to use the computer. One rainy night, I took advantage of the sound of the rain to get up without being heard. I walked quietly to the living room, and after closing the kitchen door behind me, I heard a loud, "Hey!" come from both sides of the living room at the same time. Everyone else was asleep, and the voice did not sound familiar. On top of that, it sounded like a whisper, but also extremely loud. No person could physically whisper that loudly. I froze in fear, and after a few seconds, I managed to look back around the living room, and after seeing nothing, I opened the door behind me and ran back to bed. I kept that story to myself, so I would not scare or worry my brother and sister until more weird things started happening. On another occasion, the 3 of us were in the living room. My brother was using the computer, my sister was lying on the couch, and I was sitting in the chair. We were all facing the front wall of the house, and we had a clear view of a large window and the front door, which also had glass panes looking out into the front yard. It was night, but the lights were on in the living room and outside in the front, a black figure shaped like a man ran past the window and the front door. We all jumped in our seats and looked at the window and then the front door at the same time as we saw it go by. My brother turned off the computer and we all got the hell out of there as fast as we could. Another noticeable incident happened one night when the three of us were about to go to sleep. My sister had just gone to her room, and it was only my brother and me. I was about to turn the lights off and walk across the kitchen to the hallway, while he stood at the opposite end of the kitchen waiting for me. As soon as I flipped the light switch off, I saw a tall, black figure walk right past me out of the corner of my eye. I even felt the breeze from its movement brush my face. I immediately switched the lights back on, and my brother and I were standing in the same spots. We looked at each other with confused expressions at the same time and said, "Did you just walk past me?" We both knew damn well that was impossible so fast, from that far in 2 seconds. We gave each other a wide-eyed, hell no look, and I turned the lights off again, and we both ran into our rooms. There were other, less intense incidents where each of us saw this thing on our own on separate occasions, but the times we witnessed, we saw or felt the exact same things were the craziest because of how unexplainable they were. My sister brought all of this up to a friend of hers from around the block who grew up there. She told my sister that we had seen El Perdido, which is the name the locals gave this thing because other people had already been seeing him for years around our block. We have not seen him since that summer, and I hope I never do, because I cannot remember ever feeling such paralyzing fear. I have always had some kind of affinity for the paranormal. When I was a teenager, I used to write extremely dark, creepy poetry. I've always been a loner, really just one best friend kind of person, if that. Anyway, on to the story. My parents divorced when I was young, and, unsurprisingly, I became depressed. I spent a lot of time alone. We moved in with my grandparents and they gave us a little house near theirs. It was so close we didn't even have to walk 5 meters to get to the other door. My mum would spend an awfully long time at my grandparents' place, while I preferred to be alone in our little house. One time, I was sleeping in the dark there and dreamed that a man with a black face was sitting at the edge of my bed staring at me. I woke up terrified, with that horrible feeling that something was there with me. I jumped up, turned on the light, and ran to my grandparents' house. I sat beside my grandma and said, "That house can be so creepy, oh my god." To my horror, she replied, "Of course. 2 men died there from gas. They were renting the place and we found them a week later." She said it like it was nothing. That hit me hard. Well, years later, my mom remarried, and my grandpa moved to another house about 150 meters away from the previous one. I was left to rot in the old house alone for a year and a half. It was big, old, and creepy. Even though the new house wasn't very far, it still felt like I was living alone in some huge haunted house. I started avoiding most parts of the house. My life basically consisted of the living room, kitchen, and bathroom. I always had this eerie feeling that I was being watched. I was a student finishing my graduation project, so I didn't really have to leave much except to buy groceries. There were 2 long hallways in the house. The first led to the bathroom, and the second led to my grandparents' old room. It was a big room and they kept it locked because all their stuff was still inside. If you stood still in the hallway, you could not even see the door at the end. It was just darkness, and I avoided that area as much as possible. Still, I would hear banging on that door very late at night, around 2 or 3 in the morning. I would try to brush it off, try to be brave because I had no choice. I had to stay there. I literally had nowhere else to live. And every night I would lock the living room door, turn on the TV and try to sleep. The lock did not work so well, so I used a chair to hold it shut. One night I was very sick and woke up burning with fever, almost hallucinating. Then I heard the chair move. That was when I saw them for the first time. The small, dark shadow figure literally peeking at me like a kid looking through a door. I couldn't believe my eyes. I got up, switched on the lights, and saw that the chair had moved out of place and the door was slightly open. I began crying. I called both my parents and my dad, but neither of them answered. It was around 3 or 3:30 in the morning, and I prayed to try and calm myself down, telling myself I had imagined it. 2 months later, I was watching a YouTube video about the jinn, with the speakers loud. For anyone who doesn't know, jinn are creatures in Islamic belief sort of like demons. The video was titled 30 Facts You Don't Know About Jinn, and the last fact said something like, "Jinn live among us, and one is probably watching you right now as you watch this video." I laughed and said, "I'm not scared." Trust me, I regretted that later. That same night, I put on a Quran recitation since it was supposed to keep shadow people and the jinn away according to my religion. And I swear, at 2 in the morning, I woke up and saw 3 shadow people around me. One of them was at my feet, one at my head, and one right in front of my face. They made a noise I can't really explain, something like static, but it was annoying and invasive and inside my brain. I screamed aloud to leave me alone and that I wanted to be left in peace. And with that, they were gone. After that, I began suffering from insomnia. I could not sleep at night anymore. I spent the nights studying, finishing my project, cooking, watching TV, and playing video games. I would drift off around 6 in the morning when daylight started coming in. One time I did manage to sleep, and I started dreaming. The dream felt so real that it was like I had not fallen asleep at all. I began hearing whispering, but not soft whispering. I do not know how to explain it except as violent whispering, like a chorus from hell. If you've ever played Dante's Inferno, the closest thing I can compare it to is the soundtrack choir in the game. It was quiet and loud at the same time, evil and aggressive. Then I woke up hearing it in my ear. This time I was still dreaming, and I stood up to find the source. It led me to that creepy room at the end of the hallway. As I got closer, I saw a man emerging from the darkness. It felt like one man, but also like he was followed by 100 more. He was bald, short, and had huge muscular arms. I could see the veins in them. He looked straight through my soul as he came towards me. I started reciting the Quran, and at the same time I could hear my cousin screaming from the stairs of the house on my left, telling me to get out. The door was opposite me on the left, so I tried to move, but it was a struggle, like something was pulling me the other way. I made it out, opened the door, and was gasping for air. I know this sounds insane, but I thought, this thing is not chasing me out of my house. This is my place, and if anyone has to go, it's them, not me. I went back inside and started reciting again. The creepy man fell backwards in slow motion. Then I woke up, hearing the whisper in my ear again. After some time, my grandma fought with my grandpa to come and stay with me for a while. At first, we both slept in the living room, and she always kept the light on at night. One night I woke up feeling weird, and I kid you not, I found 2 things in front of me. It was like a giant little girl holding something on her left arm. She had the widest eyes I had ever seen and was grinning at me, tilting her head and staring right through me. She was holding hands with some kind of short, dwarf-like guy with greyish skin and a tail, and he was looking at my grandma. I'd had enough at that point though. I just went back to sleep and ignored them. Another time I was asleep and actually conversing with something. I thought I was dreaming, but then I realized I was awake. I could not see them, but I was arguing and defending myself against what they were saying. They told me, "You should let us in. You're done for anyway, nobody wants you, your parents left. We're the only ones who will help you now." I was afraid of them. I didn't trust them. Everything about the way they said it and the pressure they put on me felt wrong, and I felt trapped, desperate, and alone. Then I opened my eyes and realized I was crying without even noticing. Another night, I dreamt I was in a huge bedroom inside a castle. It was very fancy and decorated, but there was no furniture except for a king-size bed in the middle. There was a window looking into another bedroom where my mother was sleeping, and another sealed window in the roof. An old woman, who looked like a cliché witch, was banging on the roof window and asking me to let her in. She was furious. I spent the whole time mocking her with gestures, and she left. Another one came after her, this one deaf and mute. It was a weird, awful dream. After that, my grandma started sleeping in her old bedroom again. She began accusing me of running around her bed, throwing things at her in the middle of the night, and pulling the covers off her. But I had no idea what she was talking about. One time she woke up screaming, and we found half of her stuff burned beside her, with no candles or lighter or fire source of any kind. And she left that same night. Do you blame her? Years later, I graduated, began working and got a job outside the country. I left, and I currently work in the Middle East, staying alone in a room in our local housing. Well, about a week ago, I woke up at 5 in the morning to find a white fog in front of my face, like the whole space was covered in white mist. It persisted for a while, then turned black and vanished. I can't say what it was. Another time I woke up in the middle of the night and saw my cutlery moving about 2 meters away. I got up and saw something towering over me. I couldn't see any expression, only just a very tall, dark figure. I don't know for certain what any of it means, but I think whatever darkness was in that house has returned and is still with me. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I do hope you have enjoyed tonight's collection of spooky ghost stories, and if of course you did, you can let me know down below. Your thoughts and comments are always tremendously appreciated. I would like to extend one extra special thank you as always to my fantastic members and patrons whose names you can see on screen. Their support and contributions go a hell of a long way, and I am eternally grateful for it, so thank you. If you would like to join their ranks, get your name on the end credits, and a bunch of extra exclusive content, you can follow the links to find out more. But that's it from me, guys. Until next time, stay awesome, and good night.